Welcome to the practical part where we'll have a look at how to treat a throat chakra. So one of the important things is that the throat chakra plays a very central role in our decision-making process. So all the communication we receive from the outside world tends to create kind of a library, a store here in the throat chakra. And this is a continuous process, so continuously the chakra is picking up energies from the world, from the people around it, and slowly but surely this information is filtering inward. If it does not get discarded, it actually reaches the body and there transforms the energetic state of the energy body to create a new pattern. So first we hear about something, then we start getting a feeling for it, like yes, this is right or this is wrong. So we start either committing it or fighting it, and ultimately it becomes a part of ourselves. One of the most common problems of the throat chakra is that actually we displace a lot of fights we are used to having with the outside world to our inner world. So for instance, when I'm a little boy and my mother tells me to finish my dinner, in the beginning I will be saying like, no, I don't feel like it, I want to play outside and la 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 la. So there's the power from the outside and the power from the inside. Ultimately, one of the two is the dominant power, and slowly but surely a pattern is moving in, which ensures that I will finish my dinner and I will clean my plate. But if this is not a very easily flowing welcome tradition, because I want to play outside, then there's actually a conflict. And actually that conflict first plays out in the world outside of me and then starts playing out more and more in my inner world as well. So rather than fighting against somebody else who tells me to eat my dinner, I decide in a way not to escalate the issue, have this discussion with myself, and ultimately the one who won in the past, my mother, is again winning within this throat chakra. And while outwardly the result is maybe very easy and harmonious, like gosh, he's such a good boy, he's always eating his dinner. Inwardly, if a pattern is going in this way, will create a lot of stress and inner struggle and unhappiness. So this is also one of the reasons why positive enforcement tends to work better than negative reinforcement. You can punish a person and then eventually they will show the right behavior, and the same goes for animals, of course. You can punish them and teach them like you should behave like this or else, and then in a way the memory of that punishment or the fear of the subjugation that will ensure that the right pattern will stay in place. But there's always a lot of inner tension, inner resistance, or it can be done by, in a way, explaining matters or by positive reinforcement, like if you finish your dinner you can have ice cream for dessert. Oh yes, Mom, of course I'll finish my dinner. And then such patterns go in much more easily. So depending on the amount of pressure a person is subjected to, the throat chakra will harbor more or less of these inner conflicts. These inner conflicts can be, of course, between the outside world and the inner world, and be translated very directly inwards. It's also possible that it is really a conflict rising from internal sources. So, for instance, your heart chakra might say like, gosh, this is a really attractive person, I want to be together with them, and I want to send them flowers and kiss them. And the throat chakra might be more aware, like, yes, but this person is already married or in a relationship, and this person doesn't like me. So then you also get a conflict, but then it is arising from inner sources like the knowledge, the wisdom. You could see the insight from the third eye, compared to your experience with similar cases in the throat, and the desires which are welling up from below. That is very common for people to have a very compacted energy around the throat chakra, where lots of energies clash into each other. So often the energy flow around the throat area and in the neck tends to be obstructed by all the tension, conflict and ambiguity which is going on there. So throat problems are very common problems. It's also very easy to get quick results, very hard to get long-lasting results, because often the patterns in the throat are patterns which have had a lot of reinforcement from people around them, from experiences, especially from traumatic experiences. So while it is easy to, in a way, open up the chakra and clear a way for the energies, it is very hard to keep such energetic paths open on the longer term, because there's a whole complex, you could say a whole sub-personality, mask personality of how to behave, which is always trying to reassert itself. And ideally such a mask personality will give the person power over their environment, but more usually the mask acts more like an internal critic, which is actually repressing the original spirit and original personality. So, as usual, we first start by ascertaining the size of the chakra. It is a good sized chakra in this case, and it's not very wide, it's relatively narrow, and it doesn't seem to be tilted very much to up or down. And what is very important is also the flexibility of the structure. So if the structure is very flexible, then the person is usually very open to change, to learning new things, to doing things in a different way. If the structure is very hardened, then the person is very set in their ways, very convinced of the way things are, and they have a rather more conservative attitude. Both attitudes have their benefits, of course. So what we'll try to do is we'll try to feel how flexible this chakra is. And ultimately, the chakra is a little bit like a balloon, so what we try to do is put a little bit pressure on it, and if it is good, then it is like a balloon. You put pressure on it, the more pressure you put, the more counter pressure you get. But if you release the pressure, it bounces back up. So what I feel here is that it takes a lot of pressure to make any change. So it's like a hardened shell a bit, so this shows a conservative attitude. And when I press into it and release it, it doesn't immediately come back. It takes quite a long while for it to slowly reform itself. So there's a very low flexibility. The low flexibility is also often showing there's a low adaptiveness. And this low adaptiveness is usually because of blockages which have compacted at the base of the throat. So a person with a pattern like this may find it challenging to have to learn new things or deal with new situations until they get more conviction of their own power, of their own energy, because their own spirit wants to learn, wants to adapt, wants to experience new things. But it is now a little bit blocked by the traumas of the past. So what we'll try to do here is try to see what exactly these patterns are, which are now creating like a filter for the spirit to manifest itself. To do that, we need to feel both energies, the energy of the chakra and the energy of the spirit, which is in a way a layer underneath the chakra. So if I attune myself to the spirit itself, I do notice there's a lot of earth energy within the spirit. the earth element is very present. And this also shows that the spirit itself is also desiring to have stability, to have a pattern. What we have here is a personality which is in a way craving that stability, but even a good thing can be overdone a bit. And I think that is the case also here, that even though she is in a way looking for stability, also the patterns which she has of being in conflict are also forming part of the pattern. So she's very stable about being conflictive, rather than having the peace, which is actually what the spirit will probably want or desire. So it's looking for kind of a harmonious stability, not for a state of continual warfare, as has been impacted a little bit. It can be a little bit tricky to see the difference between the two, because from the outside, how can you tell? And it is usually by the amount of the energy of the spirit, how far it is able to reach into the chakra. So if it is very well, then the spirit can actually move into the chakra and use all the patterns, all the knowledge. Then the chakra itself becomes a tool. If the spirit itself is very confined to the very base of the chakra and doesn't get to go out a lot, then the chakra becomes more like a prism. And here it is like a little bit of both. So we can feel that the energy of the spirit, which is very light, fiery energy, has the ability to exit the body and to flow into the center of the chakra, but it doesn't branch out a lot. So there's an ability for the spirit to speak out, to do its own thing, but it doesn't have the ability to really use all the other patterns which are around it. So it is like a little core, you could say, of bright spiritual energy, and surrounded by a thick layer of normal chakra energy. And ideally it should be more like a root pattern, where you have like the main root with lots of branches going out into that chakra structure to make the whole of the knowledge and experience a tool for the spirit. Okay, so what we'll try to do here is first to see if the spirit might be willingly hiding itself behind all these structures, because if it is on automatical pilot, also the spirit doesn't have to deal with it. It's just something which happens normally and regularly. So if I feel here, I do feel there's a lot of pressure, so the spirit is exerting some power, trying to break free, but it's just not managing. So it's not at peace with its own construction. So what needs to be done is ultimately that this construction of hers, this chakra, needs to come under control of the spirit again. So the energy of the spirit should be increased over the power of the chakra itself. And where the chakra itself is completely unresponsive, it might be necessary to remove some of the energies which are in a way blocking the control of the spirit. So the first thing we'll do is see if we can create a natural breakthrough. So I will just give some support to the spirit, which is trying to bring the chakra under control. And by placing the hand here, I'm in a way stimulating my own life force and inviting her energy to come here and nourishing and supporting it by giving energy of my fingers. So we're now stimulating the power of the spirit and seeing if it can branch out a bit more. basically also to see more or less where the limits are, where the really strong resistance is. And what I'm noticing is now that we're stimulating this energy, that here towards the end, it is quite okay, because this area now gets more or less saturated, filled with this higher spirit energy. So here the spirit is apparently able to deal with the thoughts. What it is not able to do is to change the emotions or change the really habitual patterns, which are deeper. So there's freedom of thought, but no emotional freedom and no freedom from indoctrination yet. So the parts of the chakra which are more on the inside, they will need more working with. Thoughts themselves are fine. So let's start working then with the emotional part. So one of the things I'm feeling, and the way I feel it is basically by allowing this pattern, not just to speak to her, but also to speak to me. So I'm trying to feel what is going on in myself if I just allow this pattern to be like giving not only instructions to her, but instructions to me. So I make my own energy very soft, very gentle, moving along, and as close as possible to her energy, so that I can read her patterns. And what I'm feeling here is really a pattern of bringing a lot of energy from the belly upwards, so that it becomes more about, in a way, imposing my energy upon others than to stay in my own core, to stay stable. So she learned that, okay, you can try to stay yourself, but then somebody else will take control of the situation. And if you go a little bit crazy, get really involved in the situation, then you can get control. But ultimately, to gain this kind of control, you have to lose yourself. So this now more or less in a trade, like either you stay yourself but have no control over the situation, this is not the option which is chosen, or you lose yourself and gain control. And ultimately, what this would be ideal if you would have some control over the situation without losing yourself. So first I'll ask if she would be okay to make this change.
Yes.
Okay, so then we can start working on this pattern. So what I feel here is that like the amount of pressure which was being applied to her tended to be too much to resist. And rather than giving in to the pressure, she has a pattern of then just doing everything she can to fight. So she's really a total war kind of person. But in a way, in total war, you also sacrifice your own industry, your own land, your own population to try to gain that victory. And this is one of the problems, that in a way she doesn't know how or when to back down, when to say like, okay, this is not beneficial for me to escalate the conflict, to go deeper into the conflict. Because in a way, for her, in this pattern, it is better to destroy yourself fighting rather than to survive by withdrawing. So first we need to get rid of the importance of control, because situations are always changing. The life is very fluid, and right now if you make every situation a life or death struggle, then that situation gains a lot of importance while it is just a moment in life. So let's first try to address this conceptual problem. So now inputting new information directly into the chakra. Normally it would filter through the mind, Like she would see people do it differently, she would hear about people doing it differently, she would start to understand and to ponder, like, oh, maybe this is a better method, she would try it out, and la la la. So slowly, over usually a period of about 2 or 3 years, she could also, by focusing on it, start changing it herself. But now we're trying to take a shortcut here by inputting information directly and supplying enough energy to create a new competing pattern of having more scaled conflict, where the amount of energy you put in is proportional to the amount of energy the other person is putting in. So it is not about gaining complete control or crushing your opponent. And it is also putting in a new pattern of having a limited engagement, of staying in the conflict, but then just waiting, not escalating it, but just waiting for the best time or opportunity to advance your goals, and the willingness to retreat a little. So it does seem that at least the spirit is very happy with these more mature patterns which are being offered to it, which offer a finer degree of control than the previous patterns did, which are very much an all or nothing system. Okay, so that has improved a little bit. What we still have is some very resistant parts in this part of the chakra. This is completely unwilling to budge. This has to do a lot with the desire to win. So apparently it is unacceptable to come in second place, or let alone in last place. It is better to be, in a way, destroyed than to submit. So this is very much, you could say, a pattern of a person who would prefer any fate but, in a way, slavery. Very anarchistic pattern. But also, in this case, too strong and limiting the spirit. So a pattern of pride can be very useful. It can really give a lot of support, it can give a lot of stability, a lot of clarity to a person. So pride is not what we want to remove completely, but what we want to do is to actually find a way in which the pride can be saved even if a conflict is lost. Because it is now like either she wins and her pride is intact, or she loses and her pride, her self-esteem is destroyed. So any one conflict will have a huge impact on her self-image, on her confidence, and this makes her very vulnerable. And because of the vulnerability, she will tend to overinvest in conflicts to protect herself. So we want to detach the pride system, the system of self-worth, to the system of competition, because there are ways for you to be valuable, to be loved and respected, even if you don't win every battle. So here we open up the pride system. So ultimately the pride should be an internal thing. It should come from really the root, from the third chakra upwards. There should be a confidence in yourself which will simply express itself. Now the pride is much more like a status. It is something which is only on the outside. Like, gosh, this is my title, so because I'm president or general or whatever, I'm okay, and if I'm not that, I'm nothing. So it's a very common problem, apparently, especially in the Western world, where things are very bureaucratic, where people really identify with the position they have in society. So the ultimate root of the problem is that she sees herself through society's filters. Like, okay, if I'm rich and successful, then apparently I should be proud of myself. If I'm not, then I shouldn't. And this is, of course, nonsense. It's just a control mechanism of society to make people, behave in the way society wants them to behave. So we need to get rid of this programming and to place this kernel of pride in her third chakra. So first we'll try to take it out. And it is a relatively high energy. It's really coming from her spirit. She has a very prideful spirit. And then we start moving it down to where it belongs. And of course pride, just like anything, especially one of the 7 deadly sins, can be used very easily as a weapon, because it does provide a lot of power if you're willing to use your pride or your anger or your envy or your greed. But ultimately, being controlled by these deadly sins is not very healthy for the spirit. And of course we all have these patterns, but they need to know their place. And right now it was going into a place where it had too much control, rather than just being a lower supportive energy. So the third chakra is now absorbing the pride energy, so that's good. So now we'll remove the last remnants of this pattern from the throat chakra. So that the self-worth can remain intact, regardless of whether a conflict is won or lost. It's often that a person who has too little self-esteem, they start focusing a lot on external conflicts, in a way trying to repair their inner problem by having outward success. This is, however, a system which will ultimately never work to satisfaction, and will just keep driving a person forward into, often a career path, always trying to achieve what they cannot feel in themselves or give to themselves, namely a feeling of contentment, a feeling of satisfaction. So within society it is actually a very useful survival mechanism, but within spirituality it is really pulling a person away from themselves and from their spirit into the economic machinery. So now already there is more ability of the spirit to gain control over the middle part of the chakra. And there's still a lot of issues which can be worked at, but for the purpose of time and brevity, we will just move in to the closer parts of the chakra. So here we have the same rigidity again, holding on to the patterns. And what we have here is a very strong identification. So the patterns have become really a system of self-identification, like who am I? I'm the person who believes this, who does this, who has accomplished this. So there's really a definition of self here. And this definition of self is very static because it's basically based upon her history, her past, rather than her essence or her talent. And ultimately any such definition is not helping for a person to be very adaptive or in tune with the environment, because the person keeps seeing themselves as they were in the past. So they identify with past glories and past defeats, and thus are also very likely to stick in this to this pattern, to stay there, and to remain in a way trapped in their past, in a way forced also to repeat it again and again. So what we need to do here is to, in a way, break the person free from their past so they can be more in the present, in the moment, rather than be caught by their fears and hopes and other projections which are also coming out of the past. If this pattern is very strong, then the person becomes really unable to accept their situation, and they often start fleeing into fantasies or into alternate realities. And actually a pattern like this is very common with artistic people, who often had very defining traumas which they cannot get rid of, and in a way anything they do artistically is a result, or in a way an expression of those very traumas. So here again we will have to see, like, do we want to get rid of it? Spiritually it is healthy, but artistically it might be harmful. So, would you like me to work on these patterns or not?
Yes, because I'm not going path of artist anyway. Not anymore.
Okay. And it's important to realize also that this has nothing to do with the creative talent. It has much more to do with the creative urge. So it doesn't mean that whatever creative work she will do will become less beautiful or less harmonic, but there won't be such a enduring pain or enduring hope which needs expression anymore, which cannot move out normally. And any trauma removal can be, in a way, harmful for that urge to express oneself, but also too many traumas also become paralyzing, so then the person cannot express anything anymore. It's also one of the problems of also many modern day artists, that they either do not have sufficient traumas or defining traumas, or that they actually get rid of them and thereby lose a lot of their drive and inspiration. Because modern day artists do not understand the value of their own traumas. They want to have it both. They want to be a great artist and they want to be happy, satisfied, carefree and stable people as well. These two things tend not to go together very easily. It's not impossible, but it's a tricky thing. Because an artist, by its very definition, is very reactive. But it is only through deep personal experience that reactiveness can get amplified, can be made more dramatic, more iconic, more collective, rather than merely personal. This is also the difference between a great artist and a not so great artist. Whether the experience is in a way really universal, the energy is universal which the artist is expressing, or whether it's merely a personal interpretation. Many modern artists are unable to reach the collective levels, unfortunately. because they shy away from their own deep fears and desires. But here I notice a lot of patterns which have to do actually with her father. I feel a very strong male energy, very autocratic male energy. For basically a man who doesn't listen to anything or anybody. And therefore also is, I should say, I think this has limited the development of the usual feminine power to manipulate men, because he's very hard to manipulate, not very responsive. So there was not enough, you could say, of male energy to play with, to toy around with in the important phases of the life. So she has not developed a tendency to use men like toys. And this again, because she sees how other women use men like toys, but she doesn't, so leads to some doubt as to her own femininity. And because indeed the feminine side of her power has been very restricted in its development, because it was not merely a neutral reaction, but actually a negative reaction which usually followed an expression of it. And this is also a very common pattern we see with very autocratic people, that they only respect other people who are very similar to them, who are also completely autocratic, not listening to anybody, just doing their own thing, because they mistake being blind and stubborn for strength. So we have here also the double pattern. So we have the natural pattern, which is arising from the spirit, which is feminine, which is communicative, and we have the autocratic pattern, which was imposed in this case by the father, to be in a way very non-communicative, do things your own way. And of course there's a choice here, like why does a person choose such a father? Also because there's a desire to learn something, to gain some knowledge, but it can also turn, instead of a path, it can turn into a marsh where people just get bogged down in their development, as is the case here. So there has been relatively little growth, relatively little development, because the power was simply too strong and also too different to be absorbed and integrated well. So now that we've removed some of the energetic memories, we can try to stimulate the power. And now we start feeling again the structure. We feel that the energy of the spirit can move sideways a little bit into this area and also into this area. Not as much as in the end yet, because there are still a lot of memories, there's still a lot of smaller sub-patterns connected to it. But at least the process of the spirit being able to work with the existing patterns, with the existing knowledge and experience has been started. So now we can start to see a maturation process of the spirit being able to decide what to do with everything which has happened to her, rather than being forced into a certain mold by society.